All right, so pre-acquisition. So before you even submit a LOI, how do you figure out what the lender is going to loan against it, right? So you need to send a couple things to your mortgage broker, to your lender. First one's going to be a trailing 12, which is a monthly income statement, so T12, the rent roll, current rent roll. If you have an offering memorandum, if the deal's on the market from the listing broker, offering memorandum is great. Property address if it's just a refinance or if it is a off market deal. And then I need the estimated purchase price and rehab. And once those items come in, this is what you get back. You essentially get what the lender can do. This is a Fannie Mae loan. So they have a 10-year option and a 12-year option. And then it shows their underwriting. And so we're going to go through what all that underwriting means next. So how does, let's say, Fannie Mae size these loans, right? And the first thing that comes up is net operating income. So how do they get to their net operating income? It is essentially your revenue minus your expenses, which is great. It's pretty simple, but then everyone calculates it differently, right? So most aggressive obviously is going to be sellers, listing brokers. They want the highest NOI because NOI divided by your cap rate is going to get you the highest price. In the middle will probably be the buyers, right? Because they are going to do some things, maybe pro forma rent. Like, what do I think I can get the rents to? It's going to be a little bit higher than what the lender. So the lender, the appraiser, they are going to be the most conservative. They're going to look at historical income, and they're going to be very conservative on expenses. So let's go through sort of line by line here. Start at the top of the P&L. Gross potential rent, right? So if all the units were leased at market, then what would be the most that you could make in that year? And that's going to just essentially take the number of units times the market rent times 12. And then let's go to the next item here is vacancy. So there's going to be physical vacancy, right? So based on the current rent roll, competing properties in the area, you want to use at least probably 5%, just because when people move out, it's going to take some time to turn to units, and you're typically never 100%. So minimum 5%. And then you could look at the submarket to figure out the remaining vacancy. Next is what we call economic vacancy, and this is rental concessions, delinquencies. What specials are you giving? A lot of times, even though you might charge someone $900 a month, they might not always pay you $900 a month, and so some of that is written off in bad debt. And so you start at your gross potential with the maximum that you can make, but then you subtract out vacancy, you subtract out concessions, and that gets your net rental revenue. And that is what Fannie Mae is going to use at a trailing 3. So they're going to take the last 3 months and annualize that number to use for their net rental. Some people will even be more conservative and look at the last 12 months and use that number. And then some brokers, they will use T1. So for lenders, Fannie Mae, they're going to use the last 3 months, annualize that number, that net rental income. So that is one of the most important numbers on this NOI calculation, and has a big impact. So if you go under contract or you're refinancing a loan, you want to make sure that those last 3 months are the highest possible for your loan. All right, other income. So there's good income like laundry, parking, utility reimbursement. There's also bad income, right? So late fees, security deposits. So usually they look at the T12 and plug those in. Usually a higher percentage goes to good news versus bad news. So you add your net rental plus other income, that's your total income for the property. Now let's go down to expenses. So the biggest expense for a lot of people are taxes. So you can look at the current assessed value for the property times its tax rate. Or if it's really low assessment right now, you can bring it up to 80 to 90% of the purchase price times your current tax rate. Insurance, they're going to look to you because they're going to underwrite to your specific insurance number. So regardless of what the seller has, doesn't matter. They're going to make sure that your insurance meets, Fannie Mae guidelines, and that is the insurance they are going to underwrite to directly. So that can materially change your loan. Utilities, they're going to look at historicals because you don't really have anything pro forma on utilities. So they're going to look at T12. Repairs and maintenance, they're going to look at T12. They're going to look at appraisal, but they're really going to lean heavily on your budget for repairs and maintenance. So take a look at that and budget that appropriately based on the size of the deal. Property management fee, most, larger properties, 3%, smaller properties might be 4 or 5%. Payroll, this is going to be usually close to 1,000. It could go up to 12,000, or sorry, 1,000 per unit, up to 1,200 a unit. So this is going to be like, let's say your leasing person, your maintenance person. Really, I would say you're going to need at least 2 people, starting really around that 75 to 100 units. And then as you get up to 125, 150, you probably need another 2 inside, 2 outside, so that you 4 people total on the payroll. G&A, this is going to be all the marketing, leasing office expense. This is 200 to 300 a unit. And then your replacement reserve. So replacement reserve, what that is the lender is going to hold this money, and they want you to keep reinvesting into the property. And so what they do is they get a engineer report and figure out over the next 10 to 12 years, what does this property need, right? So if everything's been replaced, great, recently. But typically there's things like the boiler, the HVAC, the roof, the carpet inside the units, all those things, they basically put in a long list and determine what goes into that replacement reserve. And that comes back to the lender and they underwrite. Typically 250 is the minimum, but for class B and C, you're probably closer to 300 a unit. So they take the total expenses and now subtract that from the income, and that is your NOI. So that is the NOI that they use for sizing your loan. And based on that NOI, they say, look, if I have $125,000 NOI and my debt service, my P&I payment is $100,000, perfect. That covers, and we are good to go. But if the NOI drops to $110,000, then I have to drop the debt service, which in essence lowers the loan, and that's how you get a lower loan amount. So let's go into an example here, just with some numbers to make it easier. So on the T12 here, you can see that net rental was $1,074,000, but the trailing 3 was $1,128,000. So they're going to use this last column is what the lender is underwriting to. So that $1,128,000, that is your net rental income. So that's what they're going to use for that T3 annualized. Other income, they're going to use T12 here. So 188, 291 plus the 4941, so 193. So they have your total income now. So net rental plus other income. So now let's go in and look at expenses. Management fee of 3%. They're going to use advertising. They're going to use pro forma here, so 200 a unit. You can see here that even though the payroll was higher on a trailing 12, they ended up using the budget. But on utilities, they're essentially using T12. They're not going to come off of that. R&M's pro forma, insurance is pro forma. This one seems to be a little bit higher. They use 600, so this might be either in a floodplain or it had previous claims on the property. And then insurance at 275, that's going to be based off of what you're actually able to get. And then taxes were brought up to 80% of purchase price times the tax rate, and then replacement reserves. And so you do your income minus your expenses, then you get to your net cash flow. That net cash flow divided by the debt service. So on this one particularly, it was 479. That gets you to a 125. So that's how they size your particular loan.